Good afternoon, and welcome to the ALCTS webinar on maximizing revenue from selling withdrawn books and unwanted gifts. I'm Pamela Blue, Chair of the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee. Our presenter today is Robert Holley, a professor at the School of Library and Information Science at Wayne State University and an avid book collector. Several years ago, Bob became interested in the out-of-print book market, and since then he has done considerable research on this topic. His presentation today will include details based on his own experience, as well as advice for those who are interested in learning more about capitalizing on the potential of this new marketplace. If you have questions for Bob, please type them into the question box on your screen, and Bob will answer them at the conclusion of his presentation. Also, please note today's session will be recorded, and you will receive an email with a link to the recording shortly after the conclusion of the webinar. A copy of Bob's slides will also be provided. As I turn the program over to Bob, there may be a slight delay, but please stay tuned and Bob will be right with you.
Hello, I'm Bob Holley, and I'm going to be doing the program today. And what my topic is going to be, how you can get the most amount of money possible from selling your withdrawn books and unwanted gifts. Here's me. I was told that it works better if you have some sense of what I look like. This is an overview of what I'm going to cover today. After I do the first two topics, I'm actually going to make an introduction to the 4 ways to sell materials. Then I'm going to go back and give some more details about valuing materials and how that affects the way you sell them. I think you have the right to know my credentials. I've actually been involved with book sales for 4 different institutions, and so I've had a fair degree of experience in this. But perhaps more important for today's session is that I have been a small internet book vendor for the last 5 years. And this has included buying materials at many, many library book sales. So I have some sense from the perspective of a book buyer what libraries should do and should not do to be able to make more money. I'm also responsible for a fair amount of research on this topic. And finally, I will be repeating some stories that I have learned from talking with other buyers and sellers. As the dealers get together in the lines waiting for the doors to open, I've learned some good hints. I'm going to make some assumptions here today. The first one is going to be that the libraries want the most amount of revenue for the least effort. I'm saying this in part because just today on the Michigan Libraries discussion list, there was a posting from a library that had this very elaborate procedure that made sure that the books got to the best possible place, and it had 6 or 7 different steps, and it would take lots and lots of time. And I'm going on the assumption that most libraries are too busy to do that. The second thing that I'm going to say is that it's very hard to do successful book sales or to sell on the internet unless you have volunteers or inexpensive staff. There is going to be an appended bibliography at the end, and the conclusion from many of the articles is that it's very difficult to make any money unless you do have volunteers, or in some cases if you have inexpensive staff like work-study students or student staff. The next comment I'm going to make is that the internet book market is very, very different than it was even a year ago. And there is the general sense that the prices have gone down on internet sales, and this is because of increased competition. So that in some real ways, what I'm doing today, bringing more people onto the market, may be what will depress the cost of materials even more. On the other hand, if you were at the first webinar, this is very, very good news because of the fact that you will be able to purchase for your libraries materials at much less cost than you used to have to pay for them. The final point I'm going to make here is while I'm talking about 4 different ways of selling, they are not mutually exclusive. So that you can have a truck of books near your circulation desk and hold a periodic book sale and still separate out your more valuable items to sell to dealers, to send to consignment, or to sell yourself on the internet. So it's not either or. There's many, many different ways to sell, and actually combining the ways you sell is one of the better ways to get more revenue. I'd also just like to talk a bit about acquiring materials to sell. The first point I will make is that library withdrawals are not worthless. They are worth less and sell for less because of the library processing, so that people are not willing to pay the same for an ex-library book than they are to pay for a newer book, but they will pay something, and I have sold library withdrawals for $30 to $50, so it's not impossible. My one suggestion is that you should handle your withdrawals as gently as possible. The library whose book sale I volunteer for now tears out a couple of pages when they withdraw the books, and that definitely decreases their value and their desirability for others. My other strong suggestion is that you make sure that you stamp them as withdrawn so that people know that they have been legitimately removed from the collection, even though, as a quick aside, one of my areas of research has been the fact that with the increase in the internet, people are more likely to steal books from your shelves that are valuable, and if they're worried about a withdrawn stamp, they just have one made. The second and potentially much more lucrative area is unwanted gifts. And so that you have looked over the gifts that arrived in your library, and they will be worth more because they're in better condition. I know that most of you probably get some gifts at least that look brand new, or they're still in the shrink wrap. I would suggest very strongly that you have a gift policy, and that if you want more gifts to sell, you encourage people to give you gifts, but that your gift policy allows you to say no to the National Geographics and to the moldy materials that would infect the rest of your books if you ever let it in the library. Let the people that want to give you that type of material recycle it or take it to the dump on their own. And so, as I just said here, that this is, I really would think it best that you should avoid worthless gifts, because that will just increase your processing costs. All right, I'd like to stop now, and if we could do the first poll. All right, I'm not handling the poll, so I will be told when it's closed and shall return. Okay, I'm seeing that there are interests in all of the topics. There's slightly more interest in book sales and selling directly on the internet, but there seems to be high interest in all the topics. Okay. I also, before we start and talk about book sales, I want to bring up the point that book sales can have non-monetary benefits for the library. The first thing it does is it brings people into the library, so that having a book sale will get people perhaps to come and take a look at you and become patrons of the library that wouldn't otherwise have come. The second and perhaps less obvious benefit is that having a book sale gives your friends and your volunteers something to do. I've got involved with my local public library's book sale, and because of this, I personally feel much more committed to my public library than I would have been before, and perhaps even more importantly, I now give them money every year. And so that this is a way to give a certain level of cohesiveness to your friends and to give them something to do that may bring non-monetary benefits. I'm going to talk about the book sale types. There may be others, but this is how I'm going to divide them up. The first one is the permanent book sale, so that you have a book sale room, you have a spot in your cafe, you have a truck of books at the circulation desk where you regularly add new materials and then you cull unsold items and there's somebody around there to get the money. The second one is what I would call regularly scheduled book sales. And in this way, you hold a book sale, let's say maybe once a month, and instead of getting rid of everything at the end of the sale, you store the unsold materials until the next sale. The final one, and which may be one of the more common ones, is that you hold sporadic book sales, and so that the goal is to sell or dispose of all the materials acquired since the last sale. And so at the end of the day, if there's unsold materials, it goes somewhere. And that can go for recycling, it can go someplace else, but that you're not storing materials. All right, could we have our second poll? Okay, I'm noticing that we have a fair number with continuous. We have some regularly scheduled, and I was actually wrong because at least among this group, sporadic is one of the least common. That surprises me a bit, but that just may be my experience. All right, the second possibility for libraries is to sell to dealers. I'm actually going to talk very quickly about the first two on the list because I don't recommend them. There are certain dealers and some who come to ALA, and what they basically do is they tell you they'll just come in and clean out your storage room. My supposition in those cases is they will offer you very little money for the books because they will need to deal with all of them, and there will only be a certain percentage of them that will be good enough to sell. The second one is that there are also some sites that will buy individual items on the Internet. I have tried those sites, and they are not willing to pay much at all given what the going rate is for materials. And so if you are selling to used book dealers, it's probably best that you sell to the traditional used book dealers in your area. The book dealers will prefer seeing only the better items, and they may want to see a list first if you're able to put it together. I'm not here talking about rare materials. The antiquarian book market is a completely specialized market. If you have antiquarian materials to sell, I believe that you should get some expertise that I won't be able to give you today. My final comment is that if the dealer offers you 25 to 30% of retail, the dealer is not trying to cheat you. Most dealers operate on the assumption that they would like to get back their initial investment quickly from the very marketable items that you have sold them, and that the rest will go into inventory, and they hope to make their subsequent profit from materials in inventory, and then probably at some point some of these items are going to need to be culled, and so they will never make any money on them. All right, can we have our next two polls that deal with dealers somewhat in order? All right, I'm seeing it go down a little, but most of the people here don't sell to dealers. All right, and then could we have the poll on those who do sell to dealers, how happy you are with the process? So this would be the people that sell only to dealers. Okay, so okay. All right, we have some dissatisfaction. Most people are just partially satisfied with dealers. All right, as soon as the poll is hidden, I will go on to the next topic. What I'm referring to as internet consignment sales are the companies that sell the items for you on the internet and give you a percentage of the sales. The two best known companies in this area are Better World Books and B Logistics. I'm going to talk a bit more about that. An interesting phenomenon in my area right now is that we have a local company that is offering to deal with the libraries, and they do the same thing except they physically come, take the books, go and sell them, and then give the libraries a percentage of the sales. I have no idea how common this is elsewhere, but I've been being asked questions about this here because libraries know I'm involved with this. All right, let's do the poll on those of you that use internet consignment vendors. And we can do the satisfaction after I talk a bit more about them. Okay, I'm not surprised that of the people that use them, Better World is used more. I talked to the B Logistics people, and then there is 11% for other. Okay, as soon as this is hidden, I will go into some more details about the advantages and disadvantages of this message. The main advantage is it's easy because the company handles all the details. So all you have to do is ship the books to them, and depending upon the company, you will pay for shipping or not pay for shipping, but whether you do so or not will depend upon the amount of revenue you get from them. These companies are very good. They will sell in multiple markets, including internationally, and so they will do the best to market your books where they can be most successful. They are also very good at identifying unsuspected high-value materials. At one presentation at the Charleston conference, the woman who used Better World Books talked about this rather nondescript popular culture item that sold for $560 in Japan. The other thing they do is they have dynamic pricing for maximum revenue so that they can change the prices minute by minute as their computer programs look at the multiple markets and adjust the prices. And finally, they promise that they will donate or recycle unused, unsold materials, and so it's not going to go into landfill, so that what they don't sell is actually used. There are some disadvantages. The first thing is that they don't want everything. I suggest that you talk to them about what the rules are for what they accept and don't accept. The more valuable the items you send them, the more they're going to be willing to pay you, so that you will need to negotiate the commission. The commission can vary according to how much and what quality of materials you send them. They actually don't have the best reputation among internet vendors because they tend to use very generic descriptions. So they cannot individually describe each book, and so I've watched this happen. They can pick which of their generic descriptions they're going to use, and they're not liked by some buyers because of that. The other difficulty they had is sometimes they don't respond as quickly as they should to customer complaints. And finally, whether they add your item to their stock depends upon their inventory. So if you have a potentially sellable item, but they've already got too many copies and they don't think that they can add another copy to be sold, it will immediately go into their discard pile. Okay, could we have the poll on whether those who use this method are satisfied with it? Okay, and noticing a yes and a partially. This is indeed in some ways the easiest of the method because it takes the least from libraries. Okay, we're sharing the poll results. Okay, before I do talk about selling directly on the internet, can we do the poll on whether your library does currently sell materials directly on the internet. Okay. All right, did we not? Okay, it seems as if we don't have anybody that is doing this. All right, I will spend some more time talking about this. It actually has the potential for the maximum revenue, probably not as much as in the recent past, but it requires the greatest effort. I'm going to talk about the things in the following list in more detail as I move on, so I'm just going to go to the next step. It does require constant attention from staff, and so that you need reliable volunteers, and you also need to determine where you're going to sell the items. I'm listing the various vendors here in at least what I would consider to be from the greatest to the least potential. I believe that Amazon has the widest market share of any of the internet vendors. I sell on Amazon. They have a fairly wicked commission structure, however, that takes a lot from the small sale, so that there are sometimes I feel that Amazon is making more money from me than the other way around. Halfcom is the permanent sales arm of eBay. They too have a commission structure that's slightly better. They don't sell as much. They're known for selling things like textbooks to students. Alibris and A-Books are also possibilities. When I looked into them, I at least didn't consider their terms to be as good, but they could work very well for others. When it comes to talking about selling on eBay, eBay is actually not a very good place to sell because of the fact that there are other known book places to sell books. The normal eBay auction is limited in time, so somebody has to want your item within the week that you put it up for sale, and so I wouldn't recommend it. I'll also talk later about storage space and an efficient retrieval. Since we didn't have anybody doing this, I'm going to skip the poll on selling materials directly on the internet, and so you've had your last poll. Well, actually, we shouldn't have anything. Let me continue to talk while you're taking the poll, because the next, oh, okay. All right, maybe we had a problem with the poll before, so that people are happy, and some are no, and some are partially. Okay, maybe we had a technical glitch with the earlier one. Okay, we're sharing the results. Okay, if we can do anything today, I think that the main thing is to maximizing revenue is evaluating materials correctly. I'll give you two real stories. I sold a book on the internet for $160 that I got free from a library because they thought it was worthless and put it on the free to take away table. And what I would like you to do is to not have that happen to you. If there's any mistake that I see both from libraries and from the garage and rummage sales where I acquire my materials is undervaluing trade paperbacks. Trade paperbacks are worth the same or more than hardcovers. So that mass market paperbacks, as I'll say in a minute, really aren't worth much, but trade paperbacks are worth at least as much as hardcovers, and they're definitely worth as much as last year's bestsellers that are worth very little. I just went to a library book sale last Saturday, and they put the coffee table books and what we're trying to get more money for them, and actually coffee table books are usually remainder stock. They're unprofitable to ship because of their weight, and so they're not really as valuable as both libraries and individuals think they are. Very pretty, but not much value. I would say that the potentially valuable categories include non-bestseller fiction. so that smaller presses, poetry, foreign authors, they may not sell as quickly, but they're worth more. I think that trade paperbacks, especially from university presses, are worth quite a bit. And so that this material often, again, has much more value than the run-of-the-mill hardcovers. And finally, I have specialized in getting gray literature, so that I will go to the library book sale at the end and take away all the little pamphlets about tourist spots all over the world. And while they, again, don't sell right away, they have created a steady stream of income for me, and they could do the same for your library. So they have more value than most people realize. So what I will recommend is that you separate the more valuable titles from the common. There's a couple ways to do that. At the first session, I talked about the two internet meta search engines. The first is bookbinder.com, and the second is addall.com. And both of these resources can provide you very quickly with valuations for materials that you have potentially for sale. I prefer use.addall because it returns a unified list rather than Bookbinder, which tries to sort things out, which in the end turns out to be useless. The other thing you can do is do what the dealers do and get the smartphone software with scanning capabilities, where you can program the phone and just scan the ISBNs, and it will immediately tell you whether it meets your criteria for putting any place other than the book sale. And so it's easy and fast for items with ISBNs or SKUs, and you can even do it relatively quickly on the meta search engines for materials that don't have either of the two. I've got several categories that I suggest you eliminate right away. The first is mass market paperbacks. I have found that they have value only if they're in near pristine condition. I found that science fiction and older materials on popular culture topics occasionally have value. I've sold mass market paperbacks for up to $30, but definitely not romance. Just put the romance very quickly into your book sale. Children's books are valuable only if they're the classics. If they're the formulaic mass market titles, once again, they will sell in your book sale. Put them in your book sale right away. I'm going to talk now a bit about pricing and selling at book sales. If you have the sporadic or infrequent sales, I strongly recommend that you start pricing your materials high, so that they should be higher within the first hour or the first evening, or that the other thing that people do is to require, for example, a Friends membership. That only the people that have a Friends membership that can come and buy materials at the early parts of the sale. Once that period is over, you can go back down to regular price, and if you want to not have to dispose of as much, at the end of the sale, you can have all you can carry or lower prices. It's not uncommon to be able to carry a grocery bag or a box away at the end of the sale from $2 to $5. I actually find that valuable for me because I like the weird stuff, but this will get rid of the stuff so that you don't have to have it recycled or, I hope not, go to landfill. In most cases, though, I do suggest that you price the same categories of materials at the same price, especially if you're going to have a lot of people checking out at the same time. It is very difficult when you have a line of 10 people to have someone open each book or look at each CD and determine whether it's expensive or cheap. And I especially recommend this if you know that you've already taken out the valuable materials and that you're going to dispose of them in some other way. If you have a higher price table, I suggest that you make sure that it's really the higher price materials that are there. As I just mentioned earlier, it's not the coffee table books. It's the stuff like the $160 item that I found on the free table, but the library did recognize to be valued. The exception for variable pricing might be if you have a continuous sale where the person who is going to do the checkout has the time to be able to look at your individual prices without causing patron problems with other people for library services or other people that want to buy the materials. One of the issues that I have encountered in my research is that some libraries have problems with dealers who come to book sales to buy. This is indeed often their best source of finding materials. On the plus side, they may be your best customers. I have watched people at my local library's book sale leave with hundreds of dollars of items. They will be very good in finding the more valuable items, and so after they will be a bit like locusts going through your new pristine sale, and by the time they have finished, they have taken most of the things that are worth money to be sold in the out-of-print market. They can cause problems because I have watched them be rude. They have been known to run down other patrons, push them, and there was one particularly obnoxious dealer I saw who was throwing the books so that they were damaged for anybody else who wanted them. Some libraries don't like them. Some libraries ban scanners. But my suggestion is to welcome them, but make them pay more to get the first choice. If you're selling to regular dealers, I would suggest that you know the approximate retail value of what you have to sell to them and that you factor condition into your selling, so that a book in pristine condition can be worth 10 times as much as the same junk copy. I did an article once that today a junk copy of Huckleberry Finn can go for $400 and a pristine copy can go for $15,000. So it makes a difference. As I've already said, lots of undifferentiated books don't sell well. This is not what dealers really want to deal with. You can probably mail your list out for bids if the library is clear about the process. So in other words, don't let the dealer think that the dealer is the only one you're selling the list to if you're selling it to multiple dealers. One particularly interesting way of selling the books that I learned about from one of my friends was in New England, where there really is a hot market for selling books, where the library put together batches of books by subject and then had a silent auction. And they got many, many dealers who came in and who were quite willing to pay quite a bit for these materials. I don't need to say much more about consignment sales on the Internet. The company will price the materials, they will sell them, and they will give you the agreed upon commission whenever they are finished with it. And so that they will provide you with a regular printout that will tell you what sold, how much they sold it for, and what they owe you according to whatever commission schedule you negotiated with them. All right, I'm going to now talk more about selling directly on the Internet. The first thing is that it is to your advantage to describe your materials as accurately and completely as you can according to accepted bookseller conventions. The way that I'm able to compete with Better World Books and the other sellers on the Internet is that I spend some additional time accurately describing my materials so that the customer knows what they're going to get, and I try very hard to describe them so that the customer will be happy. A better description leads to more sales. So if you're willing to spend, or your volunteers are willing to spend a bit of time, you are more likely to sell your materials than if you had some generic description, which I often see as used book in standard condition, which tells the buyer very little. If you are selling on the Internet, if you have volunteers, you will get to able to price better according to condition in the marketplace. I can't compete with some of the sellers, and so I price my books a bit higher, but I still sell them, though there are times when I just can't sell the book, and if I can't sell the book, I give it to a library. I donated about $5,000 worth of books to libraries last year that I couldn't sell on the Internet. Low pricing leads to greater volume. I actually try to move my things out at the minimum that I think that I can give, and so it's probably to your advantage, though, to price towards the low end. pricing software is available. The same software that Better World Books and the others use supposedly is available somewhere. I have had no luck with Google finding who is willing to sell it, but I do know that it exists. I figure I'm too small to be able to pay for it, so I haven't followed through. I have strong doubts that the buyers will pay more if you tell them that they're buying from a library. I know I wouldn't. Maybe there are some people that would. You should ship quickly. I again suggest strongly that you ship every day, no matter how many cells you have. The other thing you need to do is to make a prompt response to any customer complaints. I've decided that customers always write, and except of extreme doubt, which rarely happens, if the customer complains about the item, I refund their money. Especially since you're not paying for the materials they're selling, I would suggest that you do the same. And this leads to what is most important in the internet market is a high seller rating. The people that buy materials from you are able to rate you. Actually, a rating of 94 to 95 is not good for either selling or buying, because that means that 1 in 5 customers is unhappy. I currently have a 100% rating on half.com and a 99% rating on Amazon because I care about my seller rating. And again, if you can get a higher seller rating, this is the way that you can compete with the Better World Books and the other vendors that sell hundreds of thousands of items. Actually, one of the big players now in the market is the various Goodwill thrift stores across the country, because they are heavily now into selling books very cheaply. If you're going to sell on the internet, you have to have an efficient storage method for easy retrievals. My suggestion is to have some sort of shelf code. This is what I do. This is what Better World Books does. And so you can run your storage the same way that the airport parking lots run theirs, so that as you get new materials, you add it to the empty spots in a shelf that has plenty of room to put it. The other thing that I don't have time for, and maybe you wouldn't have time for, is that it's a good idea to reprice materials. One of the reasons why I know that prices are going down is I've done some repricing lately, and I would say that in 9 out of 10 times prices have fallen. Sometimes they've fallen so badly that I've decided I can't make any more money on what I have to sell, and so I've been culling. And so that in addition to listing new materials, there is most likely the need to go back and reprice and cull if you want to be a successful seller. In the little bit of time I have before questions, here are going to be my summary recommendations. These are the things that I consider to be the most important. I strongly suggest that you determine a way to separate the cheaper materials and that you continue to have some sort of book sale for those cheaper materials. I would then suggest that you take the valuable items and you use one of the 3 other methods that I have talked about today. Sell them to dealers in your area, especially if you've built up enough of them, that you send them to Better World Books. If Better World Books knows that you are selling only more valuable items, I know they'll give you a better rate. I don't know about Bibliography. I don't want to not talk about them. I just don't know much about them. From my talks with them at ALA, they seem to be a very reliable company. As far as book sale recommendations, I suggest that you price trade paperbacks the same as hardcovers. The little story I told last time, which I'll tell again, that this came back to haunt me because I talked about this at the Michigan Library Association conference, and the next week when I arrived at one of my favorite libraries for buying books, I suddenly noted that trade paperbacks had gone up from 25 cents to $1, and I wasn't the happiest person in the world. I also suggest, especially on sporadic book sales, that you have variable pricing. That to get the maximum amount of revenue, that you should have the highest pricing at the beginning of the sales especially when you are going to attract dealers, or that you have some preview night where there is a membership fee. I suggest then that you do have low pricing at the end, unless you want to take a lot of it to recycling or to the dump. I actually would say that you price it very, very low because you then don't want to have to deal with it. My final thought here is that you should cherish your reliable volunteers. I will return to my point that much of what I have talked about today is best handled with reliable volunteers, might be able to be handled with low-priced and part-time staff. I don't think this is something that you want to have the valuable people on your staff dealing with all that much. Perhaps you can have someone who, after the books have been sorted, kind of does a once-through to see if anything has been missed. Is there really a mass market paperback in this list that is worth more? If I have any preferred solution, if I were running a library today, what I would do would be to send the better books that I had to one of the 2 consignment sellers, and I would continue to sell the rest through book sales. As I said, I do have a select annotated bibliography appended. I'm going to caution you that with the recent changes in the market, I'm concerned that several of the articles from libraries are probably no longer reflect the realities of selling on the internet. And so these people that were talking about how easy it is to turn your unwanted books into large amounts of money, that was possible a few years ago. It's probably less possible today. I went through the books available on Amazon yesterday for the general public on how to sell on Amazon, and this is the one that looks the best. It got very good reviews. I haven't personally looked at it, but it has the latest information, and it reflects a bit the fact that the ability to sell on the internet is less than it was a few years ago, and the options for getting revenue are less. All right, I'm going to come back up probably to my summary recommendations, and I'm going to open the questions up. And I need to get this out here and to open them up so that I can see them. All right, okay. The first question I have is, are there potential public relation issues associated with selling gifts? Yes, there could be. This is one of the reasons why I suggest strongly that you have a gift policy that clearly states that you get legal title to the gifts, you're not obligated to add them to the collection, and that you can sell them if you want to. And that all of the people that give you gifts be very well aware of this policy. I know that there's some people that give gifts to the library and then they show up a couple months later and they expect to see the gifts added to the collection. And so the form or whatever you have them sign, or the person that talks to them, should make it clear what you do with gifts and that they're not necessarily you won't add them to the collection. Okay, the next one is, are there any legal issues involved in selling donated books with donation labels on the web, say Amazon Marketplace? And I can't see the rest of that question. My sense is that there probably isn't. If you have clear title to the books, then they belong to you and you can sell them. You could possibly... okay, for example, our main campus sends a lot of rejected donation books that have a specific donation plate in front that we can't use, but we're not able to donate on-site book sales anymore. I don't think there's a legal question. There could indeed be the same thing above as a public relations question. If somebody comes across a donated book that has their name in it and suddenly it's appearing in a book sale. The other thing is that I know that there are some jurisdictions that don't allow book sales. Pamela Blue, who introduced the session, lives in a place where they cannot sell materials. And so make sure that you can legally do it, but as far as the legalities of whether you can, you do own them, and as such, you can sell them. Okay. The next question, our agent sells unwanted gifts online for us and gives us 15%. Is this similar to what others are getting? My understanding is that for very high quality books, that both Better World Books and B Logistics will give you more than 15%. I am uncomfortable about speaking of exact rates at a talk like this to the public, but I do know that their rates are higher than 15%. Okay, I'm asked to please explain. Okay, but I have two questions that ask about gray literature. Gray literature is the kind of things that are not coming from trade publishers. There's lots of things that fall into this. It could be conference reports. It could be ERIC documents. It could be tourist books that people bring back from abroad. It's not, it could be privately published materials. I heard an NPR talk lately that 3/4 of the titles published in the United States last year were published privately. The difficulty is that you will get these. You can probably list them for a fair amount. The issue will be whether anyone will buy them. I had one privately published book bought, and I asked the woman how she knew about it, and she basically told me is that she wanted to become romantically involved with the author, and so she thought it would help if she read his book and he wouldn't give her one. And so that is what gray literature is. It's the things that normally would not appear in book sales and in the regular distribution channels, but I do know from looking at the materials that come into the book sales that you will get a lot of this, and some of it will be quite rare. Were you referring to internet sales when you spoke of more valuable categories? I was referring to the fact that more valuable materials are what will sell on the internet. It's not going to be the mass market paperbacks that you will be able to sell successfully on the internet. On the other hand, these are the types of materials that dealers will be interested in and which the consignment internet sellers will give you a higher commission for. So that if you segregated out your less valuable materials for the book sales, you then would stand the possibility of getting more value for these materials. I would add a negative is that if you're really doing this, whether you tell anybody or not, the dealers will most likely learn what you're doing and be less likely to come to your sales because what they want to buy from you will no longer be available. I'll leave you to decide whether that's something that you would worry about. Okay, please say more about developing and using lists with dealers. Okay, dealers will be very interested in what you have to offer. You could do something as simply perhaps as getting a WorldCat printout for the things that you think are more valuable. Give some idea of the commission or the condition. Is this in good condition? Does it have the dust jacket? So that even without a whole lot of expertise, letting the dealer have some sense about whether this is something that they would like to purchase. For your Amazon sales, what type of account do you have to set up for their payment? Amazon requires that you have some sort of credit card and or bank account. And they will use this as a way to disperse what your profits to them. And if, let's say, you did something wrong, and let's say that you now owed money to them, they would use your bank account or they would use your credit card to get the money back from you. I have not had any problems with this. Again, it might have to do with your local rules for credit cards and bank accounts. What success have you had with used bookstores paying a fee to get access on the first day? We only allow them on the last sale. I know of several sales in the area that do charge extra for the first day. You said here also we only allow them on the last day, and I do know book sales in the area that do that they want to have their customers have first choice. On a related issue, something that I didn't bring up, that there are some places like the Detroit Public Library that put valuable materials in their book sale if they believe that they should remain within the community. And so that the Friends of the Detroit Public Library has African American materials that they don't send out of the area because they believe that they should stay within the community. And I think that that's a good idea. But if you have materials that the dealers want to buy and the dealers think that they can make money, they will most likely be willing to pay more to get in on the first day of the sale. My university received a gift of about 8,000 books, mostly in U.S. history and politics. We'll keep roughly half of it. Is it better to have one massive sale or several smaller sales? I don't have a good sense there. I would actually say in this area, if what remains is relatively valuable, that this might be an obvious candidate for sending to the Logistic or Better World Books. This might be the kind of material that has extra value. If you have a public sale, I guess I'd go with a reasonably large sale rather than a whole bunch of very small sale. I would assume, though, that the good materials will go, if you have a large sale, I would assume that the good materials will go rather quickly, and what you have at the end of the day will be the less valuable materials. Okay, Amazon, what determines the price Amazon charges for a commission for libraries selling directly on the Internet? First of all, the Amazon commission structure is the same for all. And the reason it is I considered it to be painful is that every book has a minimum commission of $1.35, no matter what. If you're a seller, you also then can pay $40 a month, and then you don't pay any more commission than $1.35. If you don't pay the $30, you pay $1 a book. And so obviously if you pay the $40, the more you sell, the lower the prices per book. You do get a $3.99 shipping credit from Amazon, and most of the time you can sell books via media mail for $2.38 or $2.77, so you will make on the shipping. But as I said, I think at times that Amazon makes more money than I do from the cheaper books. Are journal runs worth selling, specifically medical journals? I just wrote a short article on this. I believe that the market for selling journal runs has disappeared in the digital age. And so my opinion, which you might want to double check, is that journal runs no longer are worth the effort that it would take to try to sell them. We are a small academic library, no friends or volunteers. Is it a way for us to solicit gifts for revenue? That could depend upon your community. One of the reasons that my community does so well is I live in an upscale reading community, and so we get lots of quite valuable books, or we get lots of wonderful bestsellers. It would depend what community you have and what kinds of materials your people would be willing to give to you. And so you could perhaps try to more actively solicit gifts, see what happens. If you get good materials, you might follow through. Have you advised university libraries on selling books? I haven't, but I'm always willing to be a consultant. And I've consulted in other areas, and so again, if somebody really wanted to hire me, I'm open for being hired. What types of books from withdrawn collections did you say have higher values? What is the best way? Go through the books. I would say that the best books with higher values from withdrawn collections are the serious scholarly materials. I have a withdrawn Oxford University Press book from the 1990s on a medieval topic that I have listed for $160. And so that is probably the most valuable. If you have classic children's book, they also might be more valuable. What doesn't go well are topics that go out of favor, like old business books won't be worth much. Textbooks are worth nothing unless they're the currently used. If they're currently used, they're worth a lot. So the things that retain literature withdrawn might have some value. So that the books that you might want to buy as a library today are exactly the kind of books that you might be able to sell because somebody else will want them for the same reasons you want them. What do people do with books that don't have ISBNs, which are not accepted by Logistics? All right, Better World Books will accept books without ISBN. The two meta search engines that I've talked about have very sophisticated search strategies so that you can usually normally very easily with title, author, and publisher get the exact book that you're looking for, and you will be able to determine whether it's valuable or not. If you sell on Amazon, one of the advantages is that as a preferred seller that you can add books that Amazon doesn't already have listed. I probably have between 20 and 30 books that I have listed that I'm the only person selling them in the world. Does this mean I'll sell them? No, because there isn't necessarily going to be a demand for them, but if they do sell, I'm going to make a lot of money. I have a very rare art book that I'm offering for $350. I hope somebody buys it. Can you use a credit card for charges, deposits from Amazon Marketplace, or do you need a routing number? How do you handle this end of things through an academic library? I hope that those people that use Amazon can get some sort of either corporate credit card or get some authorization to use a personal credit card. This makes things a lot easier for it. Again, that will depend upon the rules of your institution. If an author has signed a library book, does it influence his value? I'm actually come to believe that signed books, except for very popular authors, have no influence on value, and that at least some of the purchasers are going to take that as a defect because it's going to be dedicated to somebody that isn't them. And so my experience is that signed books, except if it's famous. If it's Ernest Hemingway, yes. If it's just a local author, probably not. Is there a market for microfilm? I'm going to answer that very quickly and say no. Microfilm is another one of those things that has become very much unpopular. What method do you use to mail your books to the customers when you sell them online? Do you request delivery confirmation and/or insurance? Would you suggest using media mail? Okay, I have discovered that I can make my most amount of money by selling the media mail and not using delivery confirmation and not using insurance except for very expensive items. I have mailed out over 5,000 books. The U.S. Postal Service has lost only 4. They've damaged probably a number, 5 or so more, but I have come out way ahead not getting delivery confirmation even at 13 cents a book, or insurance, which is a lot more expensive. So I ask for delivery confirmation only when the item is above $30. Okay, I've already answered the question about the market for periodicals, bound or unbound, and I don't think that there is a market. How should you prepare books to ship and what methods are preferred? U.S. mail, FedEx, UPS. The general sense is that the U.S. Postal Service is the least expensive. My sense is that it is a good method, and I've had little problems, and so I would have no problems with recommending using the USPS, and I would have no problems with using media mail. Media mail arrives about the same time except during the holiday rush season, and if you're sending anything to Puerto Rico, Hawaii, or Alaska, in which case it can take 6 weeks. You suggested starting with a higher pricing at library book sale. After removing potentially more valuable items, what would be a good starting point, price point for hardbacks and trade paperbacks? The most common point that I see now is $1. There are places that sell for more than that. I think a dollar is in the good ballpark where you will make lots of sales and where you won't encounter price resistance on the part of consumers. Selling for more, you may make more money but sell less. My selling point for mass market paperbacks actually is 25 cents. I think for children's books 25 cents is also legitimate. Do you have any recommendations for selling rare but brittle books online? My recommendation would be to describe them very accurately as being rare and brittle and let the person that buys the book decide. But I would be very honest about the cost. Have you had any experience with lost books not received by the customers? If so, what you did? As I said, I believe my customers when they tell me the books have lost. I only think there's one case when I've been scammed. I give them their money back right away and just don't worry about it because I've sold enough books, and so losing a few is just the cost of doing business. If I sell on eBay some individual journal titles, they say really well if they are real old or have articles by famous authors. All right, that is a possibility for eBay. It has to be something that people want. I'm talking more about shelf books that aren't particularly rare, and I'm talking about Amazon and Libris and Half.com because you can list them once and they can still be there 5 years later. I still occasionally sell books that I listed in the first month of starting to sell in 2005. Can you talk about selling other materials besides books, audio, video, etc.? Do you have experience selling the materials? Yes, I do. I actually like selling CDs. The CDs, surprisingly, I sell a lot of VHS tapes. I had one of the rarest VHS tapes in the world, and I sold it for $100. It was a documentary on Puerto Rican street gangs and shrink wrap, and somebody did buy it for $100. DVDs sell quite well. The issue there is that you're going to have to make sure that you look at the condition, and if they have defects, you're going to have to make sure that you're willing, you either test them or you're willing to take them back. I really like shrink wrap DVDs and CDs. They sell very well. I've also sold CDs in the $100 range. So there are rare materials out there. Okay, how do you handle the accounting and paperwork? I have an Excel spreadsheet that I enter my sales and take care of all the record keeping that I need. I would expect that there are accounting programs out there that would handle it just as well. I'm trying very hard to answer the last two questions before we have to go. I found in doing personal Amazon sales that first class can be less expensive than media mail in some instances. Yes, that is true. That is also one of the ways you can make more money because if you sell CDs, if you're selling cheap books, the postage rate can go as low as $1.56. And that goes all into my profit, and if you're selling for the library, that would go into the library's profit. Do you personally ship items overseas? I ship items overseas if they weigh so little that I can make money. And so I have a postal scale as I list my books and I weigh my books. Under 16 ounces, at least on Amazon, you can make money by selling books overseas because Amazon gives you a greater rate. Do you use PayPal or other systems for payment? I sell through Amazon and Half.com because I don't have to worry about payment. Amazon and Half.com collect the money for me. I don't have to worry about PayPal. I don't have to worry about commissions. That is one of the reasons why I have been hesitant to get involved with eBay, where I suddenly would be the one that had to become responsible for the finances. Is there a market anywhere for LPs? And the answer is yes. Surprisingly, there is no market for audio cassettes, but LPs, especially rare LPs, have a market. You can sell them on Amazon. You can find out then from Amazon what your LPs would be worth. Okay, we are over. I have answered all the questions. I suspect that the organizers would like to end.